Go ahead and call this September 5th, 2017 meeting of the City Council to order. Just want to welcome everyone this evening. Thanks for attending, and we'll start with our Pledge of Allegiance, and I will ask Kevin to lead us tonight. Kevin.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
No problem. We will move on to our communications from the public, and this is time set aside for the public to comment on items that appear on the agenda but are not advertised as a public hearing. So if you are here to speak regarding the water and wastewater service rates and policies, just please hold off for a few minutes until we address that agenda item. Otherwise, if you have anything else you'd like to bring to the attention of the council unrelated to that public hearing, now is the time, and just your name and address for the record, please. Kevin.
Since you called me already, I'll start it off for you. How about that?
Well, it reminded me of the time I asked Steve Lull to lead us in the pledge, and he couldn't do it. He had to sit down.
Because he couldn't remember? Or?
He was just taken by surprise.
Well, it's happened too fast. Kevin Gartland, Whitefish Chamber of Commerce. We are at 307 Spokane Avenue here in town, and wanted to just briefly speak to you a little bit about what we've been doing this summer on the Whitefish housing plan, and about a couple of meetings we have coming up next week that I wanted to make sure you're all aware of and hopefully attend and participate in. Since the last time I was here, which I think was a couple of days before we did the initial open house back in June, we did have a couple of task force meetings, half-day task force meetings. The open house in June brought about 75 to 100 people here to City Council chambers, and we were happy to get the input from those folks. Since that time, we kind of went into phase 2, and that was a series of 6 different committee meetings. We broke the task force, which is now comprised of about 24 people, into 6 different groups, looking at things like incentives, development regulations, or potential development regulations, funding sources, preservation of existing housing, public-private partnerships, nonprofit initiatives, et cetera, et cetera. Those groups met 2 or sometimes 3 times over the course of about 6 weeks in July and August, and they just wrapped up their business the end of last month, and our consulting team is working furiously to take the recommendations from all 6 of those individual groups and kind of mesh them together into what will become the skeleton of our plan. Next week, again, our task force meets in total on Tuesday afternoon for about 3 hours to take a look at what is the evolving draft that we will be coming to you with later on this year. And then on Wednesday evening from 5 to 7 here in council chambers, again, we'll be doing a public open house and workshop where we'll be basically going over what the task force and its subcommittees have been up to the course of the last few months, go through our goals and objectives that have been set thus far, take a little bit of a look at timing in terms of how we expect to see the plan roll out. It's kind of like a preliminary look at the draft that will be coming out in early October. And again, one more opportunity, big opportunity for the public to get some input into this plan, make sure we're not going too far off in one direction or the other. There are a lot of ideas out there that have come to seem like they're second nature to those of us working on the committee, but will be very interesting and I'm sure subject to considerable discussion and debate. So I'd like to invite you folks to come out, participate in that. Certainly most of you have been participating in the process thus far. We've been really happy to have your participation and your ownership in it. Again, encourage you and the public to come out next Wednesday and have another shot at this thing and help us get further down the line as we put this plan together. Great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. Further public comment tonight? Further comments from the public? Not seeing any. Yes, sir. Okay. We'll stay with the audience. Any volunteer board reports from the audience? Not seeing any. How about the council? Richard.
Climate Action Plan continues to meet. We are going to do some more public outreach. We said goodbye to our Energy Corps volunteer, Rachel Sussman, at our last meeting last Wednesday. and she will be greatly missed. She's done really, really good work in helping us develop the action plan. That's it.
Thank you, Richard. Further reports from the council? Not seeing any, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Any changes or additions to the August 21st meeting minutes, or could I have a motion for approval? Richard?
Do you want the motion and then the corrections, or you want the corrections ahead of the motion?
Corrections ahead of the motion, please.
All right. On page 4, where the paragraph with Bruce Booty, that last sentence, there's a word missing there. It says the something promotes the changes from staff, and I'm not sure what's missing there, but something is. Okay. And then on page 96, the last paragraph, it's just a typo. Third line down on the last paragraph at the bottom of the page, could we change don't to doesn't? Please.
Now a motion with those corrections?
Now I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as corrected.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Any further discussion? Michelle, just for clarification, item 5G, that'll be resolution 17-42, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion carries unanimously, Michelle, which brings us to our one and only public hearing this evening, which will be item 6A, resolution 17-43, a resolution revising water and wastewater service rates and policies, and this appears on page 126 of your packet. Just for those that are attending tonight, we'll first receive a report from our Public Works Director, Craig Workman. The council will be provided an opportunity to ask Craig any questions they may have, and then we will open it up for public comments. We'll close the public comment or the public hearing and then turn it back to the council for deliberation. And I do have a sign-up sheet, so I'll call you up individually in the order that it appears on this list, but certainly if you have comment and you did not sign up, you're more than welcome and encouraged to comment, please. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Craig.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My staff report begins on page 126 of your packet. I believe Michelle has it up. I'll just take a few minutes to talk about the background of this rate increase and then go through some of the specifics of what the staff is proposing here with this rate increase in 2017. As Council, I'm sure, is reminiscent, we went through a full-blown cost of services analysis where we contracted with AE2S to complete a rate survey or rate study that took approximately a year and a half. Sounds kind of loud. To complete, and it was a rather in-depth process that involved a good chunk of the staff and a good bit of resource from AE2S. We looked in depth at operation and maintenance throughout the water and wastewater collection and distribution system, as well as all of the costs to treat water, send it out to distribution, and to treat water that's collected through the wastewater treatment system. Historically, the city of Whitefish did an annual rate increase, which typically went up with inflation, and it's recommended that public water utilities go through this full-blown rate study process or cost of service analysis every 5 years, or when significant infrastructure projects are proposed. As everybody's well aware, there is a significant infrastructure project proposed in the wastewater treatment plant, which we are currently in design of and looking to break ground in the next 2 years. That project is estimated in the $15 to $17 million range. And so with that in mind, the rate study was completed. The study came out with several fairly significant realizations. In the water portion, it was noted that irrigation user classes are not generating the revenue necessary to meet the cost of service associated with irrigation water use. And so each year in the proposed rate structure, those irrigation numbers are adjusted to bring them in line with the cost necessary to generate that water. There was also a pretty significant conservation effort in those irrigation, reflected in those irrigation numbers, with the intent of trying to curb some of the over-irrigation that we believe may be happening throughout the city. A couple other things to note in that rate study is that the high-pressure zones in the water distribution system were not necessarily creating the revenue necessary, and so those are seen as pretty significant adjustments throughout the proposed rate structure. In the wastewater classes, the SC2 user class was slightly under generating, and the SC1 step and Rest Haven were generating also at a percentage less than the associated cost to maintain those systems. So based on those findings, you'll find in the staff report as well as in the notifications that were mailed to all of the customers and the notification that was published for the last 3 weeks in the pilot, the proposed water and wastewater rate increases. The state mandates when we do water rate increases that we do some comparisons with our most popular or highest populated water and wastewater classes, and so that was also provided in the notifications. That water class is the 5/8 meter in-city rate with an SC1 sewer class. So using the comparison, the average use of 4,000 gallons of water and wastewater per month, the monthly domestic water cost in that rate class goes up about 0.74%, which is about 30 cents from $40.78 to $41.08. The monthly wastewater cost goes up about 12.9%. And that, of course, is reflective of the significant capital costs that are shown for the wastewater treatment plant. That 12.9% reflects a $5.09 increase from $39.57 to $44.66. We've also gone ahead and projected the irrigation water in that class. The irrigation is proposed to increase 4.9%, or approximately $2, from $40.80 to $42.80. So based on the work that was done in the rate study and the current figures that we're seeing in water production and wastewater collection, it is recommended by staff that we move forward with the rate increase that's shown in that staff report and has been distributed to all of our customers. One thing I'll note, we've had, as we typically do, a fairly significant amount of feedback from the customers in Rest Haven. Rest Haven is the highest, currently the highest rate class that we have in our sewer collection system. The city spends considerably more dollars on the users in Rest Haven because they're all septic tank effluent systems or grinder pumps that through many maintenance agreements, the city is obligated to perform maintenance on those systems. We see significant increases or significant costs associated with the maintenance of those systems, primarily due to the fact that they're on private property. We don't have real good records of the location of the systems. We don't have real good records of the maintenance or the changes that have happened to those systems when they do occur. And so on an annual basis, when we do rate increases, we look at the costs associated with the Rest Haven systems and adjust those accordingly. And so I'm assuming that we'll likely hear from some residents in Rest Haven, and I have, in an effort to try and curb some of these increases, I sent a correspondence out to the residents in Rest Haven, and I've been working with a group of property owners there to try and come up with some solutions on how we can perhaps change some of the rate structure within Rest Haven. So if some of those comments come up tonight, know that that's something that I have been working on, and there will be future conversations that will come before council if that's something that Rest Haven wants to pursue. So with that, I do recommend that the rate increase shown in the staff report and distributed to the customers be approved and the resolution be adopted as presented.
Thanks very much, Craig. Any questions for Craig? Later? Okay. Not seeing any, we did advertise for a public hearing for this item, which again will be Resolution 17-43, and we'll hold that public hearing now. Anyone wishing to speak, just for the record, your name and address as you approach the microphone. And I do have a sign-up sheet, and I'll just walk through this list. But again, you're encouraged, if you didn't sign up, to still provide comment if you'd like. And we'll start with Terry Peterson, and then I have Saunders McDonald, Jen O'Connell, and I believe Rick, although I can't read the name. Apologies. Who would like to start? Sure.
Mr. Workman, when you talked about the anticipated costs and the need to raise the rates, I gathered that most of it was related to maintenance and collection. Is that true?
Ma'am, just for the record, your name and address, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. No.
Terry Peterson, 1043 Columbia Avenue, Whitefish.
So may I address? The proposed rate increases that have been distributed to the customers are kind of an equilateral view of both operation and maintenance throughout the distribution system for water and the collection system for wastewater, as well as the cost to produce the water and to treat the water on the wastewater end. And so there's a variety of different factors that go into that, everything from the labor costs that we pay our staff to the cost of the fittings to repair the pipes underground. And so, yeah, the bulk of it is the increasing cost of the operation and maintenance, but there's also a fair bit of capital cost to replace the infrastructure, to put new water main in the ground when it fails, to repair sewer manholes that have deteriorated, et cetera.
Would you say that more than 50% is related to operational costs?
I don't know that I could break down the exact percentage, but
But that would be broken down in your detailed report, is that correct?
I don't think the report breaks down the exact percentage of the increase attributed to capital or to operation and maintenance, but that's found in the rate study. And so that's information.
And that's available to the
That's
public, is that
available.
correct?
Correct.
My next question is, in terms of the wastewater treatment, are you looking at encouraging and thinking about implementing any of the new technology that's available in wastewater treatment?
Yes, we are. We've begun the design phase of the wastewater treatment plant upgrades, and we're looking at a variety of different technologies through all of the phases of that wastewater treatment, everything from the initial pumping to the aeration to the mixing to the final disinfection that needs to occur in order to release the water back to the river. And so we're doing our best to look at all the technologies available and rate those technologies on a variety of different efficiencies.
Including metals and microbes?
Yeah, metals are one of the parameters that are in our wastewater permit that we need to look for.
Is that is that being inspected now?
Yes, yes, we have.
Are you adding in any to it or more sensitivity?
In terms of metals removal?
Detection.
Metals detection. Well, the detection is done at the laboratory where we send the samples off.
Which is here?
Which is in the valley. It's in Kalispell.
Okay.
We do a variety of in-house laboratory analyses ourselves, but the metals analyses are done off-site, and so the level of detection for those samples is specified by the state, and the samples are run according to those specifications.
All right. Thank you for now.
Okay.
Thank you, Terry. Saunders McDonald? Saunders, excuse me.
Hi, my name's Saunders McDonald, and I live at 2764 Rust Haven Drive. And yeah, I have talked to Craig a couple times. One of our main concerns is that the bill in Rest Haven has nothing to do with how much you put into the wastewater treatment. It's just an average of, you know, the number of homes and all the different people that are there. And our bill just keeps going up every month, even when, you know, like we're not even in Montana for 8 months of the year, but we're still paying for wastewater that we're obviously not using because we've turned off our water and nothing's going into it. So I was looking if there was a way we could get a meter or we could get something that would make it a little more fair than having us be subsidizing the year-long residents there that are running sump pumps and are doing things that actually use wastewater.
Thanks, Saunders. Appreciate the comments. Jen?
Hi, my name is Jen O'Connell. I'm at 5003 Portage Way in Whitefish. So I'm not in Rest Haven, but I am in the lakes. And I just moved to Whitefish. I'm a single mom of a 3-year-old boy. So he and we just moved to Whitefish. And I was really struck by my water bill. My first month, the water bill was, you know, fairly low. We had just moved in May. In June, my water bill was $100. In July, my water bill was $437. And a week or two later, I got the notice saying that there was a rate increase. So as a new resident of Whitefish, I was very concerned about hearing a rate increase as well as seeing a significant increase just in the 3 months I've been in the property. I'm sure a contributing factor was irrigation, but I live on a 2/10 of an acre in a 3-bedroom house. So I'm just curious, you know, if you have done any water studies at all in other areas. I know you mentioned Rest Haven, but if the lakes has also been part of your observation area when you're talking about these improvements. And secondly, you know, the quality of the water. I mean, we live in, you know, a place where we have the purest water in the world. You know, do we really need all of these enhancements that are going into a water treatment plant when, you know, cities like Kalispell or Columbia Falls are, you know, a lot of residents have their water from wells. I think we have similar water tables. So I was just wondering if you could address those 2 points. Thank you.
I'll allow this question, but just for the audience to be aware, this isn't an opportunity for Q&A between, you know, the general public and our staff. It's an opportunity for the council to hear your concerns, and we always reserve the right to then ask staff when we close the public hearing. But
Sure.
It's a good question, I'll allow it, but just for
Thank you.
the general audience, just an FYI. Craig?
So I guess really 2 questions to address. The first is the cost of the water bill. And believe it or not, it actually costs more money to treat surface water than it does groundwater. The city of Whitefish derives all of its drinking water from 2 surface water sources. One is the Haskell Basin, and the other is Whitefish Lake. And so during most of the year, the Haskell Basin provides all of our potable water. During the summer months, when irrigation kicks up and the streams in Haskell decrease in flow, then we need to subsidize from the lake. Both of those water sources do have more stringent treatment requirements, simply as a result of the fact that they're exposed to, you know, to the environment. They're open to the air. The streams in Haskell have a variety of upgradient opportunity to have human interaction, and obviously Whitefish Lake does as well. And so there's more treatment required of surface water, which drives up the cost of the water. The second question, I think, really stems to, is it necessary to treat the wastewater to the parameters necessary to the level that we do? And I think most of the residents in Whitefish would argue that yes, it is important. The wastewater that we take back from the customers that goes to the wastewater treatment plant has an ultimate discharge point in the Whitefish River. Whitefish River, of course, flows to the Flathead and then on. And not only do we have a permit from the state, you know, requiring certain treatment standards, but I think in general, as Montanans, we we pride ourselves on the water quality that we have, you know, not only to drink, but also to, you know, to play in, to fish in, to use for other sources. And so I guess I would argue that the treatment that we do at the wastewater plant is important, and that's the primary reason that we're proposing a significant project to increase the capacity at that plant. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do still have the question as to why my bill jumped from $100 to $437, but maybe that's something I could take offline.
I would suggest, I mean, Craig's more than willing to meet with you during regular business hours. He could pull the water, you know, bills, and you guys can have a discussion and hopefully get to the bottom of that.
Craig, would that be okay if I could
Of
reach out
course,
to you?
yeah.
Thank
We
you.
also, I mean, we have a staff that is more than happy to come out and take a look at your home and do a, you know, kind of a leak detection. Okay. Yeah, then let's talk.
Thanks, Jen. Appreciate the comments. Who's next? Sir.
You'll have to pardon my writing. I'm not a very good writer.
Quite all right.
My name is Rick.
Sorry, I couldn't
Rick Kratz.
read it.
And I live at 5002 Portage Way. And I made up these packages, 9 of them. I don't know how you want to distribute them. And basically, if you look right at the back, the last page, I did a calculation. I went to all the other cities as to what my water bill would cost in their location, as well as Jen's. And our prices here are 2 to 5 times higher. And a few pages ahead of that is some paper I got from the Department of Environmental Quality, where they had what the makeup of the water was. They had it tested. And I mean, I'm not a scientist. I have no idea, but it looks to me like there's really not any difference of any, you know, great quantity between here and any of the other cities. If anything, perhaps we have more chemicals in ours. So, you know, I'm trying to get my head around why is it so doggone expensive. I know it's surface water, and they, like Columbia Falls has wells. I believe Kalispell has wells. Maybe we did the wrong thing in the first place, going for surface water. I don't know, but obviously it costs a heck of a lot more to treat surface water than it does wells. I don't have answers. I only have questions.
Anything further? I guess the one response I'll have is we did evaluate the feasibility of groundwater versus surface water a number of years ago, and the highest production well that had the greatest likelihood of meeting the demand of the city in future capacity was located out on East Edgewood at the intersection of 2nd Street East and East Edgewood, and that well was pumped continuously, and it resulted in a significant drawdown of adjacent residential wells. And so that option was taken off the table, plus the added cost of pumping that water up to our current water treatment plant. And that's basically what drove the decision to go with surface water in Haskell Basin and upgrade our water treatment plant.
If you look at the last page, there's on our property, we have 2 bills because we put an extra meter in. There's no point paying for sewer for stuff you're throwing on your lawn, you know. There is a difference there. I don't know. I just I know this isn't a very big increase, but you know, it's like water running on a rock. There's a lot of people in Whitefish that aren't quite as flush as we are. You know, and it's like water running on a rock. Eventually, it wears it out. So.
Appreciate your comments.
Okay.
We'll make sure this gets on the record with our city clerk, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Further comments tonight on this item? Feel free to approach.
My name is Nina Laird. I'm at 541 Columbia Avenue. I just have just a couple of brief ones, not necessarily so strongly against it. Just a couple of things, you know, just even driving up, coming up Columbia to the city meeting. If you drive up our streets, we're really proud of our beautiful city. But if you drive up the streets, what do you notice about our boulevards? And you've asked us to water the trees, which I do. We're one of the few that waters. And as you walk, as you drive or you walk up our streets, what are you noticing? Are you really noticing the brown and the very few green? And why is that? We've chosen to do some watering, but not all of us have the irrigation systems. We're in an old part of town. And yet, at our home, we have put the watering little meters on our faucets, and I've put the, you know, to my plants. But we're senior citizens. We can't do all the underground system. But I do have a couple of sprinklers that I do water, and then I do have the sprinkler that I put on my boulevard. But it certainly has cost us actually more than we can afford, and especially when I opened my water bill today. My husband says, I don't know that we can afford to keep doing this, honey. But it's part of keeping our city pretty. And I thought all summer long, our daughter lives over out of Boise, a little town of Cuna. That's a desert area, and yet they have irrigation rates that become their part of their summer water bill. They don't have the luxury of all the water that we do. Why don't we get sprinkling rates in Whitefish? You can obviously see the difference in my water in the summertime. Why? And yet, those that can afford those irrigation deals, you know, I'm not asking for a big discount, but it'd be nice to have something. We lost our senior deal, and we miss, you know, that being able to get whatever, you know, the part that you could do, because my husband has his retirement check from the volunteer fire department, which was a volunteer service, and that's what makes the difference for us. But then our taxes go up and everything goes up, and we want to stay, we want to live in Whitefish, but it's becoming harder and harder. We want to keep our place beautiful. We raised our children here. We want to see that the children that go to school here still have the best schools that our children do. But it's a battle every time for us, because we're now on the fixed income. I'd like to see a little bit of water rate for irrigation in the summertime for all of us. You can see the difference in our water bills, definitely, so that we can keep Whitefish beautiful. I need to go in and talk, just as the other person does, to see how the rates are figured. I look at my sewer bill, and I've tried to figure it out, because it seems to say pretty close within. I looked when it was, my water was just the same and yet, or lower, and yet my sewer bill might be $2 or $3 more, back in January than it is now when it's higher. I can't make sense of it. So I don't know how. I'm trying to make sense when I get these things to how things are figured, because I need to know for us. It's really important for us now to be able to figure out in our budget of how things are figured. And it's really hard for me. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your comments. Further public testimony tonight? Sir?
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I just want to apologize for my lack of professionalism. I came straight from the job site, and I'm sorry for wearing shorts. I didn't actually prepare any notes or anything to say, but while I was sitting there, I scribbled down a few things. I'm hearing...
Name and address for the record, please.
My apologies. Clyde Dix, D-I-C-K-S, 1001 Mountain Park Drive. I'm hearing examples of bills of $30, $40, $50. You know, if my bill was around there, as it used to be where I lived in Texas, you know, I wouldn't be here. I would be say, fine, let's go ahead and build what we need to build. But I'm $200. I heard a frightful number of $400. Maybe that's an exception. Who knows? But mine is not an exception. I look at my bill. You know, I've got my history from the website. Looking at my bill, and it's $120 on the low side, $200 and up on the high side, and now it's going to be going even higher. I just can't keep up. I mean, I don't want to sound like a whiner, but it's my duty to speak up and let you know that my family's hurting. We can't keep affording more and more. Everything is going up. The groceries in the grocery store, the health care is going up. Property taxes, I just got walloped with a 38% increase in property taxes on a small little investment property I own. The resort tax is going up, the water bill is going up, and I know that there's more coming down the pipeline. I mean, it's only a matter of months, and I'm going to open some envelope or read the pilot, and it's going to be talking about something else that's going to be going up significantly in the very near future. And I don't have the type of job that allows me to just go in and ask a boss for an increase, you know, or try and raise my income. So on I don't want to say fixed income, but on an income that is pretty static, I'm not able to absorb all of this without cutting this, cutting that, cutting this, cutting that. I just want to speak briefly about the $200. In case you think, you know, I have a beautiful lawn and a beautiful garden, I'm also on a tiny piece of property. I have a family of 5. We shower once a day, and I put pressure on the boys to take short showers. We do 1 load of laundry a day with a family of 5. That's you can't get away with much less than that. And we wash dishes. Okay, my lawn is brown. My lawn is brown. I planted some fruit trees 2 years ago, and when I water the fruit trees, I feel guilty. I feel guilty because I see money going into the ground, and it's a significant amount. And I want my garden to look nice. I want my fruit trees to grow and flourish, but I'm hurting. My family is hurting, and I know this is about water and not about all the other things, but you know, it rolls up into lifestyle changes that you're forced to make when costs all around you keep rising and rising and rising. And so if there's anything that can be done, I would really appreciate it. It would help me and my family very much. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for your comments. Who's next?
Hi, my name is Billy Thomas at 240 Fox Farm Court, Whitefish. I just want to put a little plug in to ask that you reevaluate the assessment that you're charging new developers and new developments in the city to help offset the impact that the new developments may be causing the water treatment system. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Billy. Further public testimony? Further public comment on this item? Yes, ma'am.
think for all of the conversations that have gone on, I would like to see people who are assessing the fees to do some pencil and erasure math on the operating costs. Because I think if you look at the whole budget scheme of water and sewer, that seems to have gone up significantly, and it's the one area without affecting the quality of water where maybe there could be some tightening of the margins.
Thank you very much. Further public testimony tonight? Not seeing any, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for discussion or motion. Who would like to begin? Frank.
Excuse me. For all the audience, and understand, at least from my perspective, I am and remain very sensitive to the costs in the city, be it taxes, be it any of the rates that we charge for anything. The challenge that we have and we're faced this evening is how do we best allocate costs or provide the funds through our cost structure to support the water systems that we have, both the fresh water as well as the wastewater systems. Some of the reallocation and costs that we're talking about here is being forced upon us by regulation in terms of the quality of the water that we have to discharge or we're allowed to discharge. All communities are facing those same issues, and they're going to be faced with charging their customer rate base higher fees as a result. Irrigation is an issue that we have struggled with for many years around here, and how we best charge it and how we best separate it, given that an irrigation gallon does not go back into our system to have to be retreated. That's a struggle that we have, and I'm open for discussion on an ongoing basis on whether or not or how we best allow for and encourage irrigation, where certainly efficient irrigation of our boulevards as well as our lawns in the city. We haven't come up with a good system yet. We haven't come up with a good answer to that. It's if we're going to separate, as you pointed out, each of us can choose to put in an irrigation meter. It costs us to do that, and I understand there are only so many dollars in all of our budgets to allow for that. One of the things we probably ought to look at, and with your help or with your encouragement, maybe you bring to us and as our citizens a recommendation that we figure out how to fund putting irrigation meters on each of our homes, and how the system would, as a collective, would bear that cost. But that again is going to cost the system some money in terms of capital outlay. All of the rates that we're suggesting here this evening are done based on a study, an actual study of what it actually costs to provide the services and treat the water. This is not as we've done in the past. We had an ordinance that would require that we increase our sewer and water rates on an annual basis based on the CPI, and so we were going to have to raise rates one way or the other, and it was going to happen one way or the other over the next 5 years and 10 years and on. This rate structure study showed us exactly what the costs are and how we best address, a way to address how to service the costs of the system and an equitable way, or at least an equitable way to deal with that. I, for one, am, to the extent there are other ideas out there. This is one that seems to hold some water. I get the joke, but it also has some logic to it. There may have been other ways to do this, but it all would have cost the system one way or the other an increase. Again, I apologize for that, and I understand that. There's no free lunch for any of us. There was no easy way out. I can't not do these improvements to our system. I can't not maintain our system. It just doesn't make any sense for us to do that. The rate study that we're basing this proposed rate increases on was a way for us to look at actual costs and actual, a way for us to, as a city, as a collective, to pay those costs. And so I appreciate all of your comments, and I take them to heart, but know that we were not, there was no idea on any of our minds that this was a free lunch and that we could charge whatever we wanted and just add those costs to the system. That was never, ever, ever part of what it, and the rate study that we asked Craig to do, and we did almost a year ago now, was a way for us to really get a better understanding and see if there was a way that we could otherwise manage our system and the costs that are in there other than having these continual rate increases. So thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Further discussion from the council? Jen?
I think I'll add to that and say that, I think that we're pretty lucky that we were able to conserve the Haskell Basin area for the water from the Haskell Creek, because if all of our water were to come from the lake, as it does for a good part of the summer, our costs would be much, much higher. So I think we should all look to be conserving that water up there and making sure it doesn't get contaminated, and make sure we continue to maintain those rights to pull water from the Haskell Basin. One quick little note, I think it was Billy who asked about looking at impact fees for developments that go in. Just know that right now we are getting ready to do a review on those impact fees. And that will go out to bid here soon, so that we can take a look at each one of those impact fees and find out if it's justified, if it needs to be adjusted, if it needs to be removed, etc. So be looking for that to come out in public notice here in the next month or two, I would say. Yeah. Other than that, I would say I would echo Frank's comments that we're trying everything we can do to keep the costs down. I think it would be irresponsible, knowing what I know about how we're maintaining the system and the work that's in front of us. It would be irresponsible to try to cut those costs any lower. Right now, it appears to me, Craig, you can correct me, but it appears to me we're just barely getting done what we need to get done to maintain the system. Unfortunately, that's the case. We have a lot of old infrastructure in this city that has been being replaced over the years, in large part thanks to resort tax that stayed away from the water bill. So with that, I think maybe it might be a little bit helpful, Craig, if you would just explain a few of those operation costs that you had alluded to earlier that go into part of the cost of the water system.
Sure, yeah. And just real quickly for the record, Dana did a quick look at the rate study, and this increase shows about a 47% of the water increase proposed goes towards capital, and about 42% of the wastewater increase goes towards capital. So a good chunk of the remainder of that is going to go towards the operation and maintenance of our water and wastewater systems. I think the biggest factor in the operation and maintenance that we're dealing with is the salaries. The salaries make up a significant portion of the city's annual water and wastewater budgets. We do employ a staff of roughly 20 public works employees that not only handle water and sewer, but also manage all of our street infrastructure and the other appurtenances that Public Works manages. The cost of raw materials to maintain the system every time we have a water main break, we use a variety of pieces of equipment to go out and excavate those water mains and sewer mains. The fuel cost to operate that equipment goes up every year, as we're all pretty well aware. The cost to purchase new equipment goes up significantly. We're looking at budgeting this year in the water and wastewater department for a new front end loader, as well as a couple of new trucks. Those trucks go up an average of about 5% a year, which we've seen as we've been replacing equipment. In addition to that, the energy costs to produce the water and to treat the water, we've seen increases, as some of you alluded to in the past. And so there's a variety of different costs that go into all of this operation and maintenance, as well as capital, which were factored into the rate study that we completed about a year ago, and are reflected in these rates.
I think I'll add to that on the capital costs when we're replacing some of that equipment. One thing to keep in mind is the equipment that we have on now, quite a lot of it is very old and should have been replaced a long time ago. But due to the recession, we hung on to it for quite a bit longer. The last thing we want to do is be in a spot where another recession or downfall comes again and we're without equipment to maintain the system.
Thanks, Jen. Further comments from the council, or recommend a motion so we can keep the discussion moving? Andy.
I guess just a couple comments, observations, and maybe a couple of questions for Craig. First, Jen, I'll save you a trip in to, is she still, yeah, there you are. I'll save you a trip in to visit Craig. Your usage in June was 6,000 gallons and you used 32,000 gallons in July. And you don't have a sprinkling meter, so you paid sewage charge on an additional 26,000 gallons of water, which is what Rick was alluding to. It's like, so that's why you went from $100 to $400. So you were paying an awful lot of money for something that you didn't really get because we weren't treating that, but we don't have a way to differentiate that, which I've kind of always had a little bit of a problem with in the city. I mean, when a house has a basic usage per month of 3,000 to 4,000 gallons, which is roughly the average house, and then suddenly it uses $26,000, it always seemed to me that without having to have the expense of actually going out and putting in a sprinkling meter, we couldn't, and I know cities that actually do this, figure out that, okay, then that 26,000 gallons didn't get flushed down the toilet, it probably went onto Jen's lawn. So why we've not been able to do that, because, you know, putting in, as Frank said, I mean, putting in a sprinkling meter is not necessarily cheap, particularly depending on the way the curb stop comes to your house and how your house is plumbed. It can be a very costly thing, and for the 2 or 3 months that you spend an extra $200, you can do with that a lot of years before you're going to outweigh the cost of what it is to go ahead and put a sprinkling meter in. So that's just kind of one suggestion. The other thing is, I mean, and this is partly because my ox is getting gored in this one too, and I'm going to say that the step system, I still don't agree with the volumetric charge on that. Can understand the fixed rate, but for everybody in Rest Haven, part of the reason we pay a higher price is we have a higher level of BODs and CODs in our sewage. So therefore, when that gallon gets to the plant, presumably it's more difficult to treat because it sits in those tanks and more bacteria gets growing and all of that has to be removed when it arrives at the treatment plant. Now, if every gallon of sewage that went out to our treatment plant came out of those kinds of systems, I would be the first one to argue that, yeah, it costs more money to treat that. But I take my neighborhood, there's 11 systems, I believe. There's 11 step systems in my neighborhood. Several of those houses are not occupied, so I'm going to say that maximum we put 50,000 gallons a month probably of sewage out to the treatment plant. So we're putting 50,000 gallons, and we treat roughly 1.5 million to 2 million gallons a day.
About 1 million gallons.
About 1 million gallons
on average.
Okay, and we put 50,000 gallons. Say in Rest Haven, maybe puts, given the occupancy out there, they probably put another 50,000 gallons. So 100,000 gallons per month, diluted into 30 million gallons of treated waste. I'm just enough of a chemist to know, because I kind of do that with part of my work, that by the time that gets diluted down, it doesn't cost us a penny more to treat that sewage when it gets out to the sewer plant. So when I see the volumetric charge that's 4 to 5 times higher the volumetric charge, I'm willing to say, okay, part of that can be justified by the cost of the system and the maintenance. But I've had my tank, like the Rest Haven people, I've had my tank for 22 years. I think the city's had to come to my house actually a couple more times. Last time I said this, they had to come like the next day, so then it made me a total liar, so I feel kind of bad about that. But I have to say, I mean, the total number of service calls to my tank in that period of time is pretty minimal. half a dozen times maybe. Bunch early on, but that was getting the system right, and that was the contractor, not necessarily the city. So the actual maintenance, I have a hard time with that, particularly because we pay the electrical cost. Unlike grinder pump people, city pays the electrical charge on that. We pay our own electrical costs to run those pumps. That's not city cost. We paid for the system to begin with, so the city didn't capitalize that up front like they do the grinder pumps. So if we take all those kind of costs out of there, and then I start looking at my fixed costs, and which is obviously double at a minimum of what a fixed cost is for a standard 5/8 meter inside the city. And then I look at a 4 to 5 times additional volumetric cost, I have a really hard time justifying that cost. And I'm being totally honest here. I realize my ox is getting gored, but there's other people's ox that's getting gored in this too. And the other thing that I kind of have a hard time with it is we as homeowners didn't have a choice about the kind of system we were going to get. We got told what we were going to get. It would have been cheaper, quite frankly, for us to pump down to the grinder pump, to gravity feed down to the grinder pump in Glenwood, pump back up to the main on Dakota or on Wisconsin, and away we go. But we didn't get that choice. And we didn't get that choice in part, and be totally fair and honest here, because the EPA said what we were going to get for a system, and they paid for part of that system. They didn't pay for 100% of it, but they paid for a portion of it. I'll be the first one to admit that. So all that said, and then I think partly too, the reason we all did that, and the reason the EPA did it, and the reason we thought it was a good idea as a city, was to protect the water quality of Whitefish Lake, which is also our water supply. So I don't know, I mean, I kind of, again, like I said, I can afford it, I can pay it. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's a fair, if it was a huge part of our system, I would argue with you all day long that, yeah, it's a way to charge. But given the actual volume of that sewage that ends up at the treatment facility, I can't, in my own head, justify the additional cost on the volumetric side, 100%. So, there you go. Said my piece.
Thanks, Andy. Further discussion or questions for staff? Richard.
I think one of the things that we may be looking at in the climate action plan is the potential, anyway, to go to a gray water system for irrigation, that somehow we can do that. I realize there are lots of complications with it, but that's still one of those considerations. The water bill is one of those things that we watch carefully at our house, and I think that the city does a good job, and really we have our responsibility to minimize our water use. I know in our own home personally. I can appreciate having the children and their showers. That's I don't know quite how you get around that, other than all of a sudden you can turn off the hot water and they get a cold shower, and that movie, yeah, put the timer on them. Having had 3 teenagers at home all at once, I know what you're up against. I can appreciate that. So, with that said, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve Resolution 17-43, revising the water and wastewater service rates and policies as described on page 126 of the packet.
Is there a second to the motion?
A second.
Motion has been seconded by Councilor Franson. Further discussion on the motion? Frank.
I think I know the answer to this question, but I want to ask it for my purposes as well as, and I think I did ask this question when we were going through the rate study. Craig, what was the rationale for us to Andy's point, to a large degree? I can make an argument in my own mind that we have a collective of a city that has a collective water system and wastewater system, and that we all should pay ratably based on our use of the system, not on what the necessarily, because we as a city have dictated to a large degree what those systems, or how that system was going to be constructed and how it was going to be fed. Did we look at, and did the rate study give us any rationale for not using that, what I'll call that global approach to setting uniform rates throughout the city, regardless of how your system feeds the system.
Yeah, it's probably an understatement to say that Whitefish has a fairly complicated rate structure, both in water and wastewater. It's also not an understatement to say that Whitefish has a very complicated water and wastewater distribution and collection system. There's a variety of different elevations at which homes exist, and there's a variety of different types of private sewer discharge systems that we deal with. And so I believe it was one of the early stages of the wastewater, of the water and sewer rate study, where we looked at the existing rate structure at the time, where we had a couple of different water classes, both regular class and pressure zone, as well as all of the different sewer classes from SC1 to SC2 to SC3 to the STEP and Rest Haven systems. And we determined fairly early on that there's enough difference in the cost to serve each of those customers that it was worthwhile to go through a full-blown evaluation of each of those classes and keep each of those classes. And so I guess the short answer to your question is yes, we did during the rate study process evaluate the opportunity or the option to go to a global, single rate class for each. But it was determined that there was enough of a variance in the actual cost to serve customers throughout the city that it was worthwhile to evaluate each of the classes and propose future rates for each class. Can I just address one other thing real quick that Andy mentioned? We do have, there currently is in our rate policy, a means to average our irrigation use during the summer months. The problem is it requires a year of residency in the city to gather the data in order to average those numbers. And so somebody that moves in early in the irrigation season, unfortunately, is forced to pay all of that wastewater, regardless of whether it's for irrigation or not. So Jen, I'm optimistic this time next year, your water bill will be greatly reduced, but it does require a year of residency to gather that data in order to average. So maybe that's something we need to talk about on your property as well, if you're seeing spikes in your water bill without having an irrigation meter. But that is an option for customers throughout the system.
Frank?
Ms. Laird, I hope you'll take advantage of that if you haven't already or didn't know about it. Please do. And I appreciate that, Craig, because that's one of the issues that I think is a real problem, and we've gone around and round and round, because to the extent we want people to irrigate appropriately and efficiently, we also don't want to be penalizing them by charging them sewer rates that are commensurate with that irrigation use, and that's fair. But I hope you will take advantage of that, or at least go investigate that, please, because I appreciate what you and your husband have been doing and what you want to do, and it's what we want to encourage, quite frankly. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Any further discussion on the motion? I had two quick comments I wanted to make, and I hope everyone listening and who's in the audience tonight understands that the improvements to our wastewater treatment plant aren't something that are being mandated by the city of Whitefish or our own regulations. The Clean Water Act delegates the responsibility to the state of Montana to protect, surface waters of the state. And that program is a fancy term, the Total Maximum Daily Load program, basically determines how much of any particular constituent a water body can assimilate without jeopardizing the beneficial uses of the water. And so I want people to be very aware that it's a federal mandate that's requiring the city to upgrade our wastewater treatment plant to improve our discharge back to the river, and that's part of our discharge permit. We are doing everything we can to keep the costs down for our residents and our taxpayers. Craig Workman's been working with the state to secure state revolving loans, which are low interest loans provided through the state of Montana, as well as the Renewable Resources Grant and Loan Program through the DNRC, which are grants. And then secondly, related to Haskell Basin, and Jen made this point, Over 50% of the cost to protect our municipal water supply in Haskell Basin came from federal grants. We were successful in securing about $9 million out of the $17.6 million that was required to purchase that conservation easement. And the catalyst for purchasing that easement was the fact that the landowner of our water supply, Stoltz Land and Lumber Company, had a pattern of selling off those timberlands that supply our water to our city to development. And when we ran the analysis of losing our surface water sources in Haskell Basin to a solely lake water pumping scenario, our residents and users would have faced upwards of a 300% increase per month in their water bill. So again, we brought in over 50% of that project costs in federal grants to help keep the costs down for our residents and for our future residents of the city. So I want to just make those 2 points so that folks are aware that we're doing everything we can to keep your costs down as well as ours. On that note, further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. And I appreciate the public comment tonight. And again, we have a great staff. If you have any questions related to your water, sewer bill, or anything for that matter, their doors are always open and they welcome your visit. Thanks. We will move on to item 7, which is communications from the city manager. You have Adam's report enclosed with your packet. Any questions for Adam? Frank.
Any further progress on leasing of our space, the additional retail space we have in the parking structure?
Yeah, I recently talked with Chap, who's kind of handling all of our lease stuff over there, and he says that there's been several people that have called and come and looked at the space, but we haven't seen any proposals as yet.
Further questions for Adam? Just wanted to say congratulations to Adam. His daughter was recently married. Hope it was a great event, and all the best to your daughter and family.
Thank you.
In terms of the manager's report, I would just like to welcome Wade Humphreys. He started as our new code enforcement officer and building inspector, and he comes from Lake County with a plethora of experience in municipal and county government as both a planner and a compliance officer. We also just recently brought on, and I hope I pronounce her name correctly, Jenny Emninger.
Emmenecker.
Dang.
It was a lot better than I did.
And she's been hired as our Public Works Office Manager, replacing April O'Neill. All the best to April. And then finally, our newest police officer, Tessa Cowan, who we brought in from Columbia Falls. And I just wanted the audience to be aware that these are not new positions that have been added to the city, but simply replacements for folks that have vacated those positions over time. Adam, any other items to report on?
Nothing at this time, Mayor.
Great, thank you very much. We'll move on to item 8, which is communications from the mayor and city councilors, and we'll start with Richard tonight.
First of all, David, at the county commissioners meeting, the county commissioners tabled the 93 corridor study. What's your take on why they did that?
Oh, they asked.
Can you brief us on that, please?
Yeah, they asked the planner that designed that to come back and have a couple changes. They're looking at possibly a design for some frontage roads in the area that's currently zoned SAG 10 and SAG 20, because that area is undeveloped, so they wanted to see that. And I talked to him, and he, was working on that, so I don't know exactly when they're gonna bring that back up, but they do intend to bring it back. I would guess probably in September or something like that.
Okay. And I don't mean to be critical of anyone, but it's just as an observation, when I received, because I think we send this out for mailing, this was sent out for mailing, this rate study, that's contract, is that right? But I noticed that it also included a blank piece of paper to have the address on it, so we used 2 sheets of paper. I'm just trying to save paper somewhere along the way. If we can talk to our contractors about how they do that when they send the mailings, maybe we can save a tree and save a little bit of paper. Number 3, if you'll I want to draw your attention to the back of the room. Jake, if you'll take the cameras back there. The peace quilt is now hanging on the back wall and will continue to hang there until next February when the city of Whitefish will relinquish it and give it to the next recipient of the peacemaker of the year during the annual Martin Luther King Day celebrations. And number 4, though she's not here, I do want to give a shout out to Rachel Sussman, our Energy Corps volunteer who was with us last year, who just finished last week, was her last day. She was a fabulous and marvelous resource for the city in moving us along and helping us develop our climate action plan. And to get us started, be looking for some postcards in the mail and a public meeting sometime mid-month.
Thank you very much, Richard. Andy?
Couple quick things. Craig, on Dakota, there was water line dig done just north of Bay Point there. I just hope that that gets paved before the paving season is done, being as that got dug up in like March, and I saw they had to go out and put more gravel in it today, and I'm like, oh, really had to put more gravel in it? Shouldn't it have been paved like 3 months ago? So anyway, so just want to, I don't know if there's going to be more digging there.
There's still, we made a repair back in March that held until now, but it was done as a temporary repair. It still needs to be replaced, so.
Okay.
Agree, it still should have been done by now, so.
I assume there's a reason, but I was like, well, I just want to make sure we get it done before the paving season is over with. And then another one, this is for Craig probably and Bill also. Just because I walk by there a lot and I've had concerns raised by neighbors on Skiles and Lakeshore there. Well, it's not abandoned, but the city right-of-way, which is basically the steep hill by the Roseanne property, the gravel hill that's basically kind of an erosional parking lot for the, Bill, you're looking at me like I'm crazy. Okay. But I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. It's the city right-of-way that's basically the north end of Idaho, and it runs from the barricade at the end of Idaho down to Skiles. That's public property. It's being used by the residents there as a parking lot typically. Everybody remembers we had a few years ago, we had a car actually roll down the hill onto somebody's house. If we could get on a future agenda, if we have some nods, if we get a report on what that is there and what our process would be to not allow people to park on that. And I know we've ticketed and towed in the past, I think, Bill, but it continues to happen every time there's new residents that come in, and I think it's something that it is a public safety hazard, particularly in the winter. You know.
I had that look on my face because I was trying to figure out where you were referring to. But I know where it is.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's the north end of Idaho between the barricade at the end of the pavement and Skiles there. And it does get used as a parking lot, and that is public right of way. And so I think if we could have that looked at and come to us, I assume then would be a public hearing if we had to, post it for no parking. And other than that, that's all I have.
Thanks, Andy. Jen? Thank you, Jen. Pam?
Nothing tonight.
Thanks. Frank?
I'll support Andy now for his request for a hearing or whatever we need, a report on that to the extent you need additional support for that.
Thanks for the reminder. Do we have a showing of hands to Andy's point and request? And we do. Thanks.
Great.
Frank?
And other than that, to the extent we can't do anything about it, I think we're all tired of the smoke, and let's all hope for a little rain or something to change this. Thanks. That's all I got.
Thanks, Frank. Katie?
No comment. Thanks.
Thanks, Katie. We did recess earlier from our executive session where we're holding our annual city attorney and city manager performance evaluation. So pursuant to 2-3-2033 of Montana Code annotated, we will reconvene in closed executive session following this meeting. Anything further from staff? How about council? We are adjourned. Richard? Yeah. Barely.
again, a shout out to police and fire and first responders for their continued vigilance in keeping us fire safe.
Andy?
Okay, I'm going to make
We're
one
not
comment
adjourned.
too. I just want to thank the fire department for their very, very rapid response to my mother's home last Wednesday at about 4 or 5 in the morning when her cat had chewed a hole in her oxygen tube and she woke up and wasn't breathing well. But I'll bless her pointed little head, she actually got up and pushed her life alert button, which I said she would never push. But literally within 5 minutes, the paramedics were there and it was awesome. So once again, I thank them. So
Does she still have the cat?
she still has, she loves her cats. Yeah, she loves her cats.
We are adjourned.